Hi, this is a cool September morning, September 29th, 1993, and we're visiting in the apartment of Mrs. Myrtle Bayless. And I became friends with Myrtle and her husband Brim when they lived on North Shore Drive, right close to my house. And now she's living in Asbury Towers in Bradenton. So I'm going to ask you first when you and your husband first came to the island.
Well, we moved in 1947, and we left Tampa. We had a nice little home in Tampa. And again, wasn't too keen on moving down there where we didn't have any lights, we didn't have any water, and he had bought quite a few lots on the north end there. In fact, he bought that whole thing that was left, but some man came along and wanted them and gave him a little profit, and he sold them, which he learned later was a mistake. But anyway, he still had quite a few lots, and our son Bill and Mr. Ernest, Richard Ernest's father, lived in a tent out there under a tree and built a little cottage on one of the lots, which is now next to our home that we built later. 894 North Shore Drive is where our home was later built. But we lived in that little cottage until we built that. And then he got started to building and selling lots and building. And it was quite a few years before I got a home.
How much did lots cost back in those days?
Well, I don't remember what he paid for the whole bunch, but about $200. Anyway, anywhere from $100 to $200.
And that was on the bay?
We had clear down to the water. Now, he later sold them for $500, and now they bring much more than that, of course.
And six figures.
We didn't want right on the water because we felt there was too much upkeep for our house. And we saw what people had to do that did live there. It was painting all the time. So Pop, Ernest, and Bill lived in a tent and built that first little cottage. And we lived in that, the whole family, and we only had 2 bedrooms. And Bill and Mona had this little girl, baby girl. She was born that year. And so we enjoyed it. We had to dig a well, and we used the well water for the house. And then we had to buy our drinking water. Had no lights. We had to use a lamp. And my husband got busy, and he worked and he worked and he worked until he finally got them to put in lights. And then Richard Ernest bought some lots above us, and he built a home. But he went back then to Oklahoma somewhere for a while. And so, but he came back there and lived there for several years. And then they began building up all around us. It was a happy day for me when we got lights and the water, because we had to buy our drinking water, and of course we used the well water just for the house. And then, let's see, now that was back in 1947, I told you. But the road only went to our backyard and stuff. And we didn't have that little bridge down there then, you know. And I got to thinking, well, how did we get across that? You know, I knew the bridge wasn't there. And I called Bob last night, and he said, well, Mother, they dug that out later. There was a lake back there, and they had dredged and put in that bridge later.
That was Lake La Vista? Isn't that what that's called?
It's there where the little bridge is.
Yeah.
But then it was just kind of a canal, but it was low, but you could drive a car. But the road only went to our backyard. That's as far as it went. And then my husband started in on to put a road around the point, and they finally did get one around the point. And he kept, from the time we moved there, he started saying we needed a mission or a church out there. Now, Roser didn't have a church a year round at that time. He just had it in the winter time. And so he started talking about getting them to put a Baptist mission out there, because we came into town to church, and the only road was Cortez Road, and it was torn up half the time. And so I know every night when we had our devotional, he would pray, ask the Lord to help us get a Baptist mission or church started. And one of the boys said to me, I don't remember which one it was, said, Mother, why does Dad keep praying for a church? There's not enough Baptists out here to have a church, not even a mission. I said, well, I don't say anything to him. Let him alone. If he thinks that, well, let him alone. Don't mention it to him. But I felt the same way they did. So, but he kept on talking church. And Mr. Foster, did you all know him?
Foster?
Used to live there.
No.
Mr. and Miss Foster. They were from the Isle of Pines, I think. And he laid block for Brim, him and Mr. Kermode, Rad Kermode. And he said to Brim one day, he said, you keep talking about wanting a Baptist church out here. He said, I've got some lots. I'd give you a couple of lots if you wanted to build on them. And it was down there where we built our church. But they were not, it was nothing but a swamp. Low, real low and swampy. And he said, I'll give you a couple of lots there. Well, Brim would have given a lot up where we were, but he thought it was not the right place. It's the end of the island, you know. And he thought that would be better down there because it's right at the, where Holmes Beach and Anna Marie met. So he took the lots. He finally got, started cleaning them up, and it's low. And Mr. Wimpy, you remember the Wimpys? He did road work. Well, he was hauling, had dirt, extra dirt a lot of times, and he told Mr. Wimpy that if you ever have any extra dirt, says you can come, instead of bringing it over here. He brought 9 tons of dirt on those lots. And I can remember when we first, even when we first went in that little church, it was still low. We didn't have paved or anything. And we'd go down in the woods there, and I'd get berries and things, and that's what I'd decorate the church with. That's after we did. But we finally then, Brim went in to see Brother Anderson and kept telling him, he said, we're going to get a church started out there. I said, if it was some kind now, he said, if you don't want a Baptist, I said, all right. But I said, I want you to come out and look at these lots. So they finally came out and looked at them. They said, well, see if he'll sell you another lot. And I don't remember whether he sold it to them or gave it to them. But anyway, they got another lot from him, and then later they bought more lots. And could have bought all the way down Archer Way on that side for a little or nothing, but we just didn't have the money. But we could have bought it. Mr. Archer told Brim and sell it to him anyway. And but some of the men in the church.
Do you remember how much that was?
No, I don't care, but it was very little. I think about $100 a lot. And so Brim built, bought some himself, but he couldn't buy them all. And they voted on it, and some man was against it. Of course, later he saw where he was wrong. And Brim always regretted that. But anyway, we got enough lots there, and then he kept on till he got those lots paved. And we built the church in 1950, and we had when we was having had gone into the church. It was just the one building. Bill drew the plans.
Your son?
Son Bill, he drew the plans. So we just had that one building, and I know we went in, I was having our Sunday school, we'd have it just different ones, the groups in the church, the only place we had. And we were going to have our Bible school, our first Bible school. That was in 1950. And I was the president of our class, and that morning I got up and said, remember, we're having a Bible school starts tomorrow. And if you know of anyone that would help, we surely will need some help. And of course, we're about 4 of us that really went, and there's mostly just my family at that time. And so one young woman came to me afterwards and said her name was Jean Gardner. She was a visitor. And she says, I'd like to come because I'm engaged to a man that's a minister, and I'd like to learn more about church work. And I said, will you come? And another lady that was a visitor said, well, I have a station wagon. Said, I'm living here while my husband's in the service, and I have 2 boys, and I would like to come, have my boys come, and I can haul children. I said, that'll be fine, do it, bring them all. I didn't dream, but we had the biggest Bible school we ever had, that first one we had. And I was the director because Ms. Jones was supposed to be, and she got sick, had to go to the hospital, so they got me to take her place. And we had a real good Bible school, and this girl that had told me she would like to come, I found out she had a beautiful voice, and she would sing a solo every morning, and the kids just loved her. And I didn't see her or hear from her after she went back wherever she lived. I don't remember where she lived until I've been here. And she came here to visit her aunt who was in the health center. And she saw my name up on that records down there on the wall. And she asked a lady if I was here. She said, well, you tell her I want to see her, and I'm coming back tomorrow, and I want to see her. And she wrote a little note, and she says, on the note, she said, told the lady, she wouldn't know me by my married name, so she put Jean Gardner. And she says, and tell her I didn't marry the minister after all. So when I got that note, I was so thrilled because everybody fell in love with her. She was such a sweet girl. And the next day they called and said she was down there, wanted me to come down. I went down there, and when I got off the elevator there, she stood there. I wouldn't have known her if I hadn't known that's who it was. She had gotten so stout, white-haired, just as white-headed. She's now married, lives in California, and has children and grandchildren. So she came on up with me and stayed the rest of the afternoon, and we just got a lot. We talk about, I haven't seen her in all these years. We didn't miss a word, you know, the conversation. We just enjoyed it so much. She came back on the second time, and I don't know, I don't see her aunt anymore, so I don't know whether she left. But I thought that was strange. That was 1950, and I didn't see him over this year. And so then, that's just about all I know about our only thing we did keep adding on to our church, and as you know that, we finally had to build a larger church. And this church, I think it was, my husband said it was a little over $1 million we had it in.
And then you took over the water company land too, didn't you?
Oh yes, one day we were going to start a town, and my husband said to me, he said, you know, they say they're going to sell that property. And I said, well, you know, the church should buy that. He said, yes, it should. So he told them that. He first asked them what they wanted for the property. And they said they was going to sell it at auction, I think, highest bid. And so for him, we were going to North Carolina. He told some of the men, he said, now I know what it can be bought for. And he said, go that high and you'll get it. It was one of the men who told him they'd look for the church to have. But they didn't do that. They went higher. They didn't get it. They didn't sell it. So when we got back, they did have another sale on it. And I don't know what we'd have done if we hadn't got it.
I think what's interesting is what you did with that reservoir that they had.
Oh, yeah, well, now that's why they named it the Bayless building. His name's on it now. That was so thick, the walls were. And Grim said, said that would make the best Sunday school rooms. And later, if we want to, and they are planning now to build a recreation hall on top when we get the money. But when our church paid off the mortgage, they're a little hesitant about going into debt again. But they are going to do that someday. And so he talked to them. Well, nobody was in favor of it. I didn't. And he said, well, let me ask you a question. If I'll pay for having a door cut in each end, will you let me do that? Well, sure, they let him do that. Anything he'd pay for, they let him do. So he paid, he first had Bob come out and look at it, his engineer. And Bob said, well, sure, it would make a wonderful Sunday school rooms. And so he paid the man that was doing road work, doing the island road work. I think it was $1,000 a door he charged. And Grim had him come in and pay for it. And so they made Sunday school rooms. They got a lot of nice Sunday school rooms and bathrooms and everything like that. And now they could build up on top of that. I think that's where they're planning to build a recreation hall. I don't know. That's the latest I've heard. I don't hear much about the church since I live here. I go on Sunday and that's all. But Grim loved that church. And
I always remember those coconut palms out front that were...
Weren't they pretty? That just made me...
They're gone now, though, aren't they?
That was the year that Bill was killed, that they died, that they got froze. And I had gone to up to New Jersey to stay with Mama. He was killed in November the 26th in Lima, Peru. And we didn't get one thread of anything back to show that.
He was working down there.
And he was on his way home. And he wrote me a long letter the night before, and he wrote me a long letter. And I know he had a premonition something's going to happen to him because of the letters. And he told me in my letter, and Grim wouldn't let me see it for a long time. He carried it around in his pocket. And he told me that he had bought all of it. Since everybody wanted to, they lived in Brazil a year, the family did, but they had come back to the States. And he wanted to make this trip. Another man was to make this trip, and his wife didn't want him to go, so she got sick, and so Bill went in his place. And he wrote this letter the night before he was killed, and he said, I spent yesterday, or today, that day, he said I spent wrapping Christmas presents. Said they all wanted gifts from Brazil. And he said, Mama has always wanted a kind of a ring. And he said, I got her a beautiful 18 karat. He said, why do women want such big rings? It was the nicest letter, but in the letter, he told so much that Mona and I both knew he must have had a premonition. And he was doing some kind of secret service work for the government too, because when he went to get on the plane, Mona said he told her not to stand with him, her and the family stay back.
Well, going back to the early days when you first arrived on the island, I know you said you went without electricity for a while. What other hardships or problems were there?
Well,
like
we
that?
had no road, for one thing, just an old dirt road. And we came, and we had no, you couldn't buy anything electrical, no refrigerator. So we had to use ice box. And Mona and I had seen in the paper where somebody had a larger ice box for sale. So we had an old Buick, and I was driving it. I said, well, we're going to look at it. We came to Bradenton, and down there where one of the schools was, across from it, was the house. I looked up the address, and they had a nice old refrigerator for ice. And I bought it, and they put it in the trunk of the car. Well, it was rather late when we started home, and when I started, I found out I didn't have a brake one. I didn't have a sign of a brake. And I drove from Bradenton home without any brake. And it was dark. It got dark on us. And Bill and Mom and Prim got worried about us. And they got in the car, and Bill's car, and started toward town. And thought maybe we stopped on the road somewhere. And we met them down there on the island. And
Not on the bridge, did you?
No.
On that old wooden bridge?
No, we had to cross that.
Huh.
And and I just motioned at them, and I just kept going, because I couldn't stop. And they
How
said,
did you finally stop?
Well, they knew that, well, I just pulled up in my yard, cut the power
Ignition
off, and just lighted up in my backyard. That's as far as the road went. And so I went on home. I was really scared though for that, but we had no traffic on. That's the difference then and now. I couldn't have done that. But we drove all the way from Bradenton with that old big refrigerator hanging out the back with no brakes.
And so you just put cakes of ice
Yeah,
in
we had an ice delivery man. He'd bring us ice. And they had
And milk
lamps.
delivery? Did they deliver milk?
Hmm.
Did they deliver milk on the island?
Oh yeah, we had our milk delivered and our ice and our water.
And then you had to
Drinking
come
water.
into Bradenton for groceries, or
Oh yeah.
the IGA?
Well, IGA store, there was IGA store.
I don't know what time, what year was the IGA started?
Well, it was there when we moved there.
Oh.
It was just a little store.
Yeah, so maybe early 40s or something.
But we moved there in 1947.
47.
And I know one time, Brim and them was coming to town for something, and it was raining, and I thought, well, I'm not, this is when we first moved there, and there was no houses anywhere around. And I said, well, I don't believe I'll go. I think I'll just stay at home. I never thought about getting scared. And after they were gone, there'd been in the paper about a colored man had shot and killed a woman over in St. Pete, and they were looking for him. And I lay down. I thought I was going to take a sleep while they take a good nap while they were gone. And I was lying in there in the bedroom, and somebody knocked on the back door, which was right back of that room. And I got up and went to the door, and there stood a black man. Scared me half to death, but I didn't let on I was scared. And see, we had built in that little house where Pete Carr lived or something. We had built that. And he had stopped his truck there, and I didn't see his truck. I just saw him and didn't see he had a car. And he said, "Is Mr. Bayless here?" Well, when he said that, I knew it was somebody. And I said, "No, he's on the town." And he said, "Well, I've got some lumber." And I told him where to take it. But I sure was that. I was scared to death. The first thing I thought of was that man they were looking for. And I said then, I said, I'll never stay here again without somebody. That's my little man I keep in the clock. And before you leave, if you don't mind, I need some batteries in it, and I can't get it open. I don't know how to do it. And
Do you remember any bad storms that?
oh, we had one bad hurricane.
What year was that?
Well, that was the first year we were
The
there, I
40s.
believe. And everybody nearly was leaving. Other people down the road was leaving out. But we all, I'll tell you, it was the year that Mr. What was his name? That was Mayor lived up there at
Bill Breyer
no,
lived near you?
lived up at, had the motel up there.
Carlisle.
Carlisle.
Carlisle,
What's his first name?
Mr. Carlisle.
Jim.
And Grim went up and told them they hadn't heard the news. They was talking it real bad. Everybody had 15 minutes to get off. The bridge was going out. And I got in the car and I went over and found Bill and him. They was working over on the go up there trying to save a house from washing out, an old log house. And they were way out in the water. And I called him. I said, Bill, you come and get Mona and the children and take them on into town. I said, if the grown-ups don't want to go, that's all right, but I'm not going to let those children stay. So he did. He come on and got Mona and children, but they said, going in, said we were worse off than if we'd have stayed at home. The road was so bad. But they went on in to, we had some friends there on 26th Street. They went to their house, and it was upstairs.
Was there a lot of damage on the island from the storm?
Quite a bit at that time. And we all went to the minister that we had at that time, he called that night and said, did you all know that the hurricane's turning and coming back? And they are telling everybody to get off. They only have a few minutes to get off. So we went up. I think Bill went up to Mr. Carlisle, and they come. We all went to the community hall, and we stayed all night there. And the next morning, Mr. Carlisle went out to the drug store and got stuff and cooked breakfast for us.
Now the community hall is where the Island Playhouse
Yeah.
is, right on the corner?
Yeah.
And what kind of things did you have up in that building?
Well, at that time, they had different ones used it, you know. And that's where we had met for our church. We met there for a while. Brim kept getting back in. He kept trying to get Brother Anderson out to look at different things, you know, and talking about church. So one day he came in all excited and he said to me, come on, I want you to go somewhere and see this old school building. They had moved into the new school. He said, it even looks like a church. It has a steeple. And said that'd be a good place for us to open up, have a mission. I went with him, and sure enough, it was a nice.
That's on Magnolia, where the community center is? Community
way,
center? Down from the IGA?
yeah, it's way down there.
Yeah.
Back, you know. So he called Brother Anderson at the First Church. Of course, we knew him in Tampa. And he told him, he said, come out, I've got something I want to show you. Well, then it came in that day and he said, put a little extra plate on today. He said one of the boys brought out his lunch, and they were building a hotel across the street there, the Sea Isle Villa Hotel. And and I was living in that little cottage yet, you know. And so I know I remember very well when I had some pork ribs.
Oh,
And I
you
cooked
very
them
good
and
chef.
barbecued them and had a good dinner. And who come in but right at noontime but Reverend Anderson. And of course he stayed and eat too. There was a crowd of the men, my men, Bill and Brim and this another fellow they brought from the work, and him. And so when we got through, Brim said to Brother Anderson, said, now you sit here and talk with Myrtle, visit with Myrtle, and I'll go get my men back to work, and then I'll be back. I want to show you something. And when he left, they all left. I said to Brother Anderson, I said, Brother Anderson, I said, now, I don't want you to do something that you, that Brim's enthusiasm influence you to start a mission if you think it wouldn't go over. And he says, oh, I won't. I said, I'd rather not start it as far as be a failure. He said, oh, no. And so when Brim came, they went on, he took him down and showed him that. But he said, find out how much they'll rent it for. Well, Brim called Mr. Blackburn right away. And he said we could have it for so much, I don't remember. And then the next day, Reverend Anderson called me and he said, Myrtle, he said, I've been thinking about that place. He says, it's off the beaten path. He said, tell Brim to find out if they would rent the community hall for a couple of hours on Sunday afternoon. And he said, I would come out and do the preaching. And while Brim was gone, we were talking about it, and Brother Anderson said to me, says, you know, this is a different situation to a lot of places than if it's out in the country. You could get a young student or somebody to come preach, but said people out here are used to going to bigger churches, and you've got to have somebody with experience to do the preaching. I said, yeah, I think you're right. So he said, find out what we can rent the community hall. So I told Brent. He called Mr. Blackburn. He was superintendent of education. And he said we could have it for $10. But we'd have to clean it up.
A month or a year?
Every time we met.
Oh.
Every time we met on Sunday afternoon. And he said, you'll have to clean it up when you use it because it'll be in a mess. I think the Island Players was meeting there on Saturday night. And he said, then you'd have to leave it clean. And of course, that's what we had to do. Hello. That's all right. And we met there on Sunday. And of course, he'd bring out some from the first church, and that's how we started. And then, of course, when we got our own church built.
Well, I think we're going to...
I hope I have help, Jenny. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we had a really nice visit with you, and we thank you.
And I guess I told a lot I shouldn't have.
No, and I know that the church was a big part of your life.
It was a big part of our life because Brim, I don't know, I said it proved, and I've thought more about it since he's been gone. Brim was not what you'd call a religious man, you know what I mean. He was active, he was a church member, and he was active, and he was a Christian. But I said it just showed you what the Lord could do with somebody. And they certainly must have put it on the Brim because you'll never know how he worked to get that church.
I know. I want to know how you got the name of Brim.
After when he was a little boy, his grandfather had slaves, and they were freed, but one old man wouldn't go. He said I'd rather be a well-fed nigger than a hungry nigger out there, and he wouldn't leave it. And his name was Dickie Brim, and he took Brim and would take him, and his grandfather said to him, he said, okay, Dickie, he says, this is your job right here, and that's to take care of his boy. That's the only grandson they had. And he was just a baby. And he said everywhere Dickie Brim went, he was astraddling his neck. And Brim, I've heard him tell so many things about it. One time they were out walking, and he saw a snake, rattlesnake, like nigger did. And he sat Brim on the fence and said, now you sit here until I kill this snake. and so many little things, you know.
Where was that? What state?
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Oh, and that's one thing I wanted to tell you about was the snakes we had.
On the island.
Oh my, we had snakes, rattlesnakes all over that place. And one day Bob come running in. We had a little dog named Stinky, a little Cocker Spaniel. And she had found a rattlesnake. And Bob was scared to death. He was riding his bike. And he says, come running in there, almost crying, come, Daddy, quick, let's kill this rattlesnake before it bites Stinky. So we went up there. I went too, of course. And here was this big old rattlesnake coil. And the little Stinky was just standing there barking at it, you know. And they killed it. Well, then another time, I was standing looking out my picture window. Now, this is after we moved into our home. And I saw a big one crawl right across toward where James Louise Reynolds lived at that time. And it went in where there was concrete things that the government had something there. And I called James and told him, I said, James, there's a big rattlesnake crawled in that place right there in your front yard. He never could find it. I don't think he looked very much. But you couldn't go at it. And then another time, Paula Tripp, that's after they moved there, she came over to get her children. They stayed over on the, yes, they were living in the little house then, and we were living in our home. And she came down, it was a beautiful day, and she said to me, I was out in the yard, she says, where are the children? And I said, well, I think they're in the house. They're having a tea party. She says, inside a morning like this? I said, well, I'll tell you why they're in there. I said, I was just over there, and I said, Mona said she smelled a rattlesnake. And Paula laughed, you know, and made fun of her smelling a rattlesnake. And I said, well, I guess you should know they had one in the house when they stayed at the firehouse.
What do they smell
Stayed
like?
off. They do throw off an odor. Oh, well, I've heard different people say different things. Somebody said it smelled like an old sock, dirty sock, but I don't know. But they do throw off an odor, because one day when Brim was fire chief, and they had to have somebody at the firehouse all the time, and the people that was living in there had moved, and he said to Bill and Mona, said, if you all want to make a little extra money this winter, why don't you move in the firehouse and stay there and rent your place out? So they did. So they wanted to go shopping one Saturday, and Mona called me and asked me if I'd come down and stay with the children and be there. Somebody had to be there all the time. So I went, and she said to me, says, I've got something wrong with that refrigerator. And it says there's the funniest odor about it. It says seems to be in the back, and says when I take the duster and dust back there, it makes a funny noise. And it was a rattlesnake, a rattling. And it had stayed in, I don't know how long it had been in there, but anyway, that was on a Saturday morning. So she says, and it's a funny odor coming from it. Well, I didn't pay attention to it, because I saw there's something back there, and she says, and I don't know what it is. So they went on to town, and I stayed with the children. Well, then that night, Grim had a meeting down there that night, and I said, well, I'll go on down and stay with Mona and them till you get through the meeting. I didn't want to stay alone. So I got down there, and I said to Mona, did you get your grip? No, she says, it's still back there. And says, I still smell that odor. Well, I was there all afternoon with the children, you know, and that night, the dog, they had a dog, they let it sleep inside at night, and it wouldn't get off of the couch. It wanted to sleep, you know, they tried to get it off, they wouldn't get off. And so Mona told Bill about this odor and this noise behind the refrigerator. So they heard it. And she said to Bill, now there's that noise again. He said, well, that's a rattlesnake, but says it's outside the window. Well, she said that night she heard Butchie was just a baby, and said he was turning in his bed and said it scared her to death. She thought, well, what if it's in the house, because it was behind the refrigerator. So the next morning, the dog, she got up to let the dog out the door, and the dog went out the door and the screen door hung, and the snake went out the door and coiled right at their front door, and was
But outside.
out in the garage, you know. And Bill saw what it was, that it had been in the house all night now and all day that day, and I don't know how much longer. And so Bill said, went to the phone. He didn't have a gun. And he called up there and says, tell Bob to run down here right quick and bring a gun to kill this snake, rattlesnake. Says it's coiled right at our front door. And so Bob got in the Jeep and away he went. And I know, who was the man who had that filling station there? Had a lot of girls.
Jesse Ingram.
Jesse Ingram. He saw Bob go by and he said Bob looked like he was mad and holding the gun. He said, I thought, oh my land, says Bob, and Bill had a falling out as he going after Bill. And he didn't know why he was driving so fast. So he went down there and killed the snake. And we'd see them all over. They'd crawl across the road. And then that day that Paula came over there, and she said, what are they doing in a house a pretty day like this? I said, well, I'll tell you why. I said, Mona says she smells a rattlesnake around the shrub out here. And she laughed and made light of it. Said, whoever heard of anybody smelling a rattlesnake? I said, well, I guess she ought to know. I said, she had one in the house down there when they lived in it. And she got the children, took them home. And she come back in a little while. She says, I just come back to apologize to Mona for what I said. Said, I just run over a big rattlesnake.
Oh my. Well, it sounded like you had some exciting times
We
back
did.
then.
Oh, I could tell you a lot more if I could think of it.
Well, we're going to say goodbye now, and it's been nice visiting with you and hearing of the early days on the
Well,
island.
come back again when we